My girlfriend has this habit of talking in her sleep. At first, I found it adorable and hilarious, especially when I'd repeat her nonsense back to her. She'd mutter things like, "The sky is folding," or "We need to raise the ground." Harmless, right? We'd laugh about it the next day, though she never remembered her dreams. I still wonder what "we need to raise the ground" was supposed to mean. Our nightly routine usually starts with us cuddling for a while before the heat forces us apart. Eventually, we end up back to back, each on our own side of the bed. She always falls asleep before I do, so I get to hear the full range of her sleep talk. At first, I actually looked forward to it. It was fun to share her weird midnight musings with her and our friends. But now, I wish she'd just stop. After last night, I'm not sure how I'm ever going to sleep again. It started around 11 p.m. She'd already dozed off while I was still awake, flipping through a book. We were lying back to back when I heard her mumble something under her breath. It was too faint to understand, so I leaned over to check if she was awake. "Nope, fast asleep." Shrugging it off, I went back to my book and got lost in its pages until I eventually drifted off. The next thing I know, I'm jolted awake by her talking, loudly this time. My eyes snap open, and somehow, during the night, we'd both shifted to face each other. Her face is just inches from mine. But here's the terrifying part. Her eyes are wide open, staring straight through me. They weren't just open, they were straining to stay as wide as possible. Those same eyes I love so much now look terrifying enough to make my heart race. My whole body flooded with adrenaline, and I bolted upright, tossing the covers aside. Her head didn't move, but her eyes followed me, like one of those creepy portraits in old horror movies. For a split second, I convinced myself she was just irritated by the book light and had said something like, "Can you turn that off?" But as I stood there looking at her, it was clear something wasn't right. Her body stayed perfectly still, but her eyes started darting around, looking at me, then the walls, then the door, then the ceiling. Summoning all my courage, I asked, "Are you okay?" No response. Her eyes, though, locked onto mine like they were trying to pull me into some void. Her breathing stayed steady, the kind of deep, rhythmic breathing only a sound sleeper has. That's when she spoke again, in this low, gravelly voice that didn't sound like hers at all. "Come back to bed, dearie." Dearie. She's never called me that before. We got our share of pet names: Pumpkin, Baby, Cupcake. But dearie? That sounds like something out of a Victorian ghost story. Still trying to make sense of it all? I asked. "Are you awake, sweetie?" Nothing. Her eyes shifted from me to the door, then the ceiling again. I was this close to running out of the room when her eyes suddenly rolled back into her head. All I could see was the whites of her eyes, glowing faintly in the dim light. Then, in that same too-deep voice, she said, "Of course I'm awake. Come back to bed," punctuating it with a tap of her fingers on the comforter. That tapping was my breaking point. Her fingers were moving, but not in a way that made any sense. Each finger pointed in a different direction, like her hands were trying to remember how to be hands. They didn't look like her hands at all. I swallowed hard and tried to stay calm. "I'm just going to grab a glass of water, baby. Be right back." "Want anything?" I was already planning to bolt the moment I hit the hallway. But she wasn't having it. Her expression turned deadly serious, and in that guttural, otherworldly tone, she said, "Take one step out that door, and I'll rip out your throat and shit down your neck." My jaw dropped. I knew I had to keep my cool, so I forced a nervous smile and said, "Well, that's an interesting suggestion." Thinking fast, I grabbed the water bottle from my nightstand instead of leaving the room. Big mistake. She let out this unholy scream, a sound so high-pitched and piercing it felt like every neighbor within a 3-house radius could hear it. Her body jerked toward me, hands clawing wildly in the air. It was like something out of a horror movie. Panicking, I unscrewed the lid of my water bottle and threw the water at her. To my utter shock, it worked. The second the water hit her, her eyes shut, her limbs relaxed, and she fell back into a deep sleep like nothing had happened. Now I'm sitting on the couch, wide-eyed and questioning every life decision that led me here. I think I'll be sleeping out here for a while, maybe forever. She'll understand when she wakes up. At least I hope she will. My hands are shaking as I type this, so forgive any typos or if I keep things brief. I might have a concussion. It's the morning after my usually sweet and kind-hearted girlfriend's body was possessed by some malevolent force during the night. I've been distant all morning, so she knows something's up, but I can't bring myself to tell her what really happened. How am I supposed to explain that she tried to rip out my throat and, well, you know the rest? You get it. I didn't sleep at all last night. Instead, I sat in the living room with every light in the house blazing, clutching a water bottle like my life depended on it. At some point, the entity that took over her body regained control, and it spent the rest of the night trying to lure me back into the bedroom. This time, it mimicked her normal voice more convincingly, adding a little emotional manipulation for good measure. "Come to bed, sweetie. Why are you on the couch again?" I refused to answer. I wasn't about to validate this demon with a response. A few minutes later, though, that dark, guttural voice returned. "If you don't open this door, I'll slit the cat's throat." Oh God, the cat. I'd completely forgotten about him. He was still in the bedroom, probably terrified and huddled in a corner. My heart sank as I realized he might already be dead. But could I really leave him in there? Could I let this thing hurt him? I'd seen enough horror movies to know this was the moment where I had to make an impossible choice. Either do something reckless and heroic or go down as the idiot everyone yells at for staying put. Against my better judgment, I decided to open the door and get the cat out. As I stared at the bedroom door, I noticed something wet and fleshy poking out from underneath it. When I pointed my phone's flashlight at it, my stomach churned. It was her tongue, inching its way out like some grotesque worm. I couldn't help but think, is she going to wake up tomorrow and wonder why her mouth is full of cat hair? Then it hit me. This was my chance to test out the new weapon I'd rigged up, a spray bottle filled with plain tap water. I aimed at the tongue and gave it a good squirt. Instantly, it recoiled, and I heard her body collapse on the other side of the door. Water worked. Water was the off switch for whatever this was. Adrenaline pumping, I yanked the chair away from the door and pushed it open. Her limp body was sprawled out on the floor, blocking my way. It took a surprising amount of effort to shove her slack form aside, and as I did, I noticed she was drenched in a black, oily sweat. The bed and floor were soaked with the same stuff. It was sticky like some kind of supernatural glue, and it made everything harder to maneuver. Careful not to step in it, I squeezed into the room. The cat wasn't in sight, but that wasn't surprising. He'd probably crawled under the bed to hide. Now I had to coax him out, which meant lying on my stomach and reaching underneath. The absurdity of the situation wasn't lost on me. There I was, holding a spray bottle in one hand, ready to fend off my possessed girlfriend, while my other hand blindly searched for a terrified cat under the bed. I felt his soft fur and managed to grab him, but he wriggled free and scurried deeper into the shadows. Frustrated, I set down the spray bottle and used my flashlight to see where he'd gone. Big mistake. The moment I pulled my head out from under the bed, I realized my fatal error. She was awake. She was standing over me, towering like some dark specter. Her teeth looked sharper from this angle, glinting in the light from my phone. Black, oily drool dripped from her mouth, and her hair, usually soft and brown, was now slicked to her head with that same oily substance. Her eyes, bloodshot and yellow, were wide and menacing. She looked exhausted. I was exhausted too, but there wasn't time to dwell on it. As I prepared to crawl out of the room as fast as humanly possible, she grabbed my ankles with an iron grip. Her nails dug into my skin, and with inhuman strength, she started lifting me off the ground. I could feel the pressure as she tried to pull me closer, clearly aiming to start devouring me from the feet up. Little did she know, I've never skipped a leg day in my life. I kicked her square in the teeth with both feet. The impact stunned her enough to drop me, head first unfortunately, but I didn't feel a thing. Scrambling to my feet, I dodged the sticky black goo and bolted out of the room, slamming the door shut behind me. My hands shook as I wedged the chair back under the doorknob, just in time to hear her start knocking softly on the other side. "Baby, come back to bed. It's late. You'll be so tired at work tomorrow," she said in her sweet, normal voice. All of that, and I didn't even manage to get the damn cat out. And my spray bottle is still in there. What the hell am I supposed to do now? Here's what I've pieced together so far. 1. The possession ends when she wakes up. Did any of that actually happen? 2. She has no memory of the horrors from last night. 3. Water works as a temporary fix, but only for a few minutes, maybe 2 or 3. 4. The black sludge she's drooling and sweating while possessed? It evaporates. The bed and floor were soaked this morning from the water I sprayed, but everything else was gone by the time I checked. 5. The cat is fine. 6. I need help. She's in the other room on the phone with work. I'm trying to get something done, but my brain won't cooperate. It keeps drifting back to everything that happened. So much for being productive today. After a while, I admit defeat and start thinking about what comes next. I need someone to fix this. I'm not exactly the type to call an exorcist. I've always been the guy who chuckles at that stuff. Those guys are just playing a role, right? You can't specialize in something that's not real. I'm no religious zealot, but at this point, I can't ignore the facts. I can't keep going on like this by myself. So, feeling completely out of my depth, I take the plunge and find an exorcist on Craigslist. I don't care about the cost anymore. Money's not an issue if it means getting this demon out of her. He tells me he'll come over tonight. But there's a catch. My girlfriend must not know what we're doing. If she finds out and can't fall asleep, I'll be charged for nothing. Great. Just the kind of warning I expected from a Craigslist exorcist. I'm not thrilled about inviting a stranger into my home. But at this point, what else can I do? The day drags on like it's in slow motion. My nerves are shot, and I can't stop flinching every time she speaks. It's like I can't look at her without imagining something dark hiding behind those eyes. Around lunch, I hear her humming in the kitchen, completely oblivious to what's happening. I can't help but feel a chill run through me as I watch her hold a knife, chopping vegetables. The terror creeps in again, this overwhelming sense of doom. Finally, work's over, and I'm about to get the worst night of my life. I'm doing my best to hide my anxiety, but I'm pretty sure I'm a terrible actor at this point. I climb into bed beside her, just like she expects. The cat's safely tucked away in the living room, out of the danger zone. We're reading side by side, and she leans in to kiss me goodnight. I can't even pretend to be asleep. I keep my eyes wide open, the light from my phone illuminating her face. She turns off the lamp and snuggles close to me, pulling the covers over us. I'm trying to breathe, trying not to panic, trying not to bolt. I've got to make sure I leave before she falls asleep. That's my window. I start counting in my head, just waiting for the right moment. 3 minutes pass. I can feel my heart racing, but I don't move. I count a few more seconds, then slip out of bed, careful not to wake her. I quickly set up the chair to block the door. "Where are you, Pumpkin? Can't you sleep?" Her voice sounds just like her. I'm sure I imagined it. Then a little louder. "It's cold without you, baby. Come back to bed." It's tempting, but I'm not opening the door. Not now. Not ever again. There's someone coming up the driveway. It's late, don't let them in. I hear a knock at the front door. I open it, and standing there is a tall guy in a priest collar. He looks exactly like Ethan Hawke in First Reformed, except with tattoos visible under his sleeves. It's like he came straight from the set of a horror movie. He's the type of guy you'd expect to show up from Craigslist. No time for pleasantries. We hear a scraping noise from the bedroom. I glance at the priest. His face doesn't show fear, at least. I'm not sure if that's a good thing or if he's just really good at playing it cool. He whispers, "We're going in." With a Bible in one hand and a jar of holy water in the other, he walks toward the door. But then something stops me. That scraping noise, it's not coming from the bedroom. It's coming from the living room. I hear the priest mutter under his breath, "The cat." I look over, and I wish I hadn't. The cat is standing in the doorway, its green eyes now bloodshot and yellow, no pupils. It's drooling that same black goo, leaving a trail of slime as it moves. But something's wrong. Its body is stretched out, its legs unnaturally long. It's now standing nearly as tall as my knees instead of the usual ankle height. I curse quietly. Of course, the damn cat got possessed. It spent the whole night in the bedroom, licking up all the demon's leftovers while I was busy trying to survive. New plan, the cat's got to go first. And then it speaks. It's not moving its mouth, but the voice comes from it, low, deep, and chilling, just like the demons. "I told you not to let him in." Before I can react, my girlfriend starts knocking on the door again. "Let me out! Let me out! Let me out. I'm weighing my options when I realize I made a huge mistake. The cat's eyes never leave me. Without warning, it leaps onto the priest, wrapping its long, snake-like legs around his neck. It squeezes, its claws digging into his skin, leaving bloody marks. The priest drops the Bible and holy water, trying to rip the cat off. But the cat is too fast. It shoves its tail deep down the priest's throat. He coughs, struggling for air, but the cat's grip only tightens. My turn. I snatch the jar of holy water off the ground and pour it into the cat's open mouth. It chokes and falls limp, crashing to the floor like a rag doll. Once it's safely locked in the travel carrier, the priest and I exchange a grim look. I ask, "You've dealt with this before, right?" He rubs his neck and looks at me like I'm crazy for asking. Of course, 1,000 times. I can't stop myself from rolling my eyes. Glad to hear it. The black sludge rides like tendrils in my travel carrier, desperately seeking escape through the small holes, its grotesque movements stirring something deep in my stomach. I turn to the priest, trying to explain, but my mind is only half there. Don't swallow any of the black liquid, I warn him. Honestly, I'm not sure how much hope I have for him now, especially after my cat's tail just went deep down his throat like it was a damn feeding tube. But we can talk about that later. There's more pressing business right now. The sobs of my girlfriend, now fully possessed, break through my thoughts, her voice a twisted mockery of her own. You don't love me. You never loved me. The doorknob rattles violently, trembling with a force that sends shockwaves through the hallway. From under the door, fingers creep into view, oily and dark, their nails smeared with that same disgusting black substance. Open this door, or I kill her. A silence falls, then the unmistakable sound of glass shattering from inside the room. Is she planning to jump out the window? Bluffing, surely. We're on the 3rd floor. That creature inside wouldn't harm its precious host, would it? But a new, sharper urgency claws at my gut. I'm losing control. Water works for a second, but she's already transforming, and I can barely keep up. I can't keep dousing her with water, like she's a damn pet chameleon for the rest of my life. I need a real plan. The priest, still gasping from the near-death experience with my cat's tail, wheezes out, "We need to open the door." What good is that going to do? I ask, my voice desperate. Water only stops her for a minute. His answer is grim but firm. It's too dangerous to perform the rites while she's in this form. We'll get her in the shower, then restrain her. Why didn't I think of that? I feel a surge of hope, a flicker of bravery, as the priest starts showing that he actually knows what he's doing. I push the chair away from the door, cautiously. From the other side of the door, I hear her voice again, calm, almost soothing. "Thank you, baby. Why did you lock me in here? I've been so scared." I freeze. That's not her. It can't be. It's that thing wearing her skin, twisting her words into poison. My heart pounds, but I shake off the sick feeling and focus. Chair in hand, I take a step back. There's a brief, suffocating silence. Then, click, the door creaks open. Her hair spills through the crack, glossy and black like oil, obscuring her face. She's taller, somehow, and as she steps forward, I catch sight of one yellow eye peering through the strands, gleaming with malevolent intent. My breath hitches. Is she still in there? Somewhere? I search her face, desperate for any sign of my girlfriend. But she's holding a shard of glass to her wrist. I don't even have time to react before the priest's holy water jets out, hitting her square in the chest. She jerks back, but not fast enough. The second spray hits her pajamas, the ones my mom bought her for Christmas, soaking them instantly. The demon's control tightens. In a blink, my girlfriend's hand, her real hand, grabs the shard and slashes across her wrist, the blood spilling out in dark, thick streams. But that's not enough. With a guttural sound, she gnaws through the rest of her wrist, ripping the hand off with her teeth. The grotesque, sloshing sound of blood and oil is too much for me to bear. Her hand falls a useless, severed mess, a puddle of gore on the floor. I watch in disbelief as her body begins to change. Shaking, convulsing, It's like watching a person die right in front of you, but somehow coming back to life. Only they're not coming back. The skin slowly turns back to its natural color, but it's not my girlfriend. Not anymore. I remember a classmate who had seizures back in school, and how we had to protect her head from hitting the floor. But I can't even move, frozen in the horror of what's happening. The priest doesn't waste time on shock. He scoops her up and rushes her to the shower. Water sprays out, and I can't even look at the scene unfolding in front of me. My mind is reeling. I'm stuck in a state of shock, staring at her severed fist, at the puddle of oil and blood. The entire room is a mess, a nest for something truly, horribly inhuman. The priest returns, standing in front of me, shaking me by the shoulders. I snap out of it. "Anybody home?" His voice is frantic. "We need to act. Now!" I'm barely able to focus, still reeling from the fact that I just watched my girlfriend tear herself apart. The priest's urgency cuts through the fog in my brain. "Do you have any rope? Handcuffs? Anything to restrain her with?" I have bungee cords in my car," I say, my voice distant, barely functioning. I race down the stairs, taking them 3 at a time, and grab the car keys. The bungee cords are in the trunk. I can't even remember how I get there or back, but I'm running, breathless and shaking. When I return, the priest is applying pressure to my girlfriend's wound, trying to slow the bleeding. I tie a cord around her wrist, just a quick fix to stop the flow. We get her into the bed, and I tie her down, using the bed frame to hold her limbs in place. One arm, both legs. She looks so broken, so not herself, her head hanging limp. I can't even begin to imagine how long before that thing inside her takes control again. But then she stirs. She wakes up. She's disoriented, staring at me with pain and confusion. The second I see her eyes, I know. She's back. But the relief is short-lived. "It's okay, baby, it's okay," I say, desperately trying to soothe her. I kiss her forehead, trying to hold back tears. "We're working on it." I can barely hold it together as I sit by her, watching her eyes go hollow once more. The demon is taking over again. Her pupils shift from brown to yellow, fading into that sickening, opaque blackness. Blood still trails down her face, mixing with the tears she can't stop. She smiles, her lips twisted in a wicked grin. "It's over. You have failed. Amen." It's the same voice, deep and guttural. I feel a sick wave of defeat crash over me. The severed hand is moving again. I see it from the corner of my eye. It's crawling across the floor like something out of a nightmare, like a spider dragging its bloody mess behind it. It reaches the spray bottle I had left on the floor, and I watch, frozen in horror, as the fingers grab it, and the hand pushes itself off the ground, climbing into the air. It's alive! The words are out of my mouth before I can stop them. The priest sees it too. He's already rushing into action. "You stay with her. I'll deal with the hand." I nod, not trusting myself to speak. He turns and heads downstairs, chanting under his breath, beginning the ritual. I can't focus on that right now. I've got a hand to find. I hardly remember the drive to the hospital. My hands were shaking on the wheel, my knuckles white as I gripped it harder, trying to keep my mind from falling apart. In the back seat, my girlfriend lay unconscious, her wrist crudely wrapped in a bandage. Every time I glanced in the rearview mirror, I saw her face, peaceful, but too still, like a doll left out in the sun. The hospital staff took her immediately, rushing her into surgery to try and save her hand. I sat in the waiting room, clutching the cooler like it was my lifeline, because maybe, just maybe, it was that damn hand. I didn't even know if they could reattach it, or if I should let them. Could it still be possessed? Was this demon truly gone, or just waiting for another chance to take control? I didn't notice the priest at first. He was sitting across from me, silent like a shadow. When he spoke, his voice cut through the sterile hum of the room. "It's not over," he said, leaning forward. His tattoos seemed to glow faintly under the lights, and I swear his eyes were darker than before. "What are you talking about?" I whispered, my voice shaky. "The demon," he said, calm as ever. "It feeds on the strongest bond in its host's life. Your love for her, it's a tether. You may have weakened it, but you haven't destroyed it. That thing will crawl back into her, or into you if it gets the chance. I couldn't make sense of it. My love for her? How could I just let that go? How could I even think about it? Before I could respond, a scream ripped through the hospital. My body moved on instinct, running toward the operating room. The nurses tried to stop me, but I shoved past them. Inside, chaos. My girlfriend was sitting up on the table, her newly reattached hand twitching like it had a mind of its own. Black sludge oozed from the stitches, pooling on the floor and forming thin, writhing tendrils that lashed out at the terrified medical staff. I froze in the doorway, my feet stuck. This can't be happening. The priest appeared next to me, flipping through that fake Bible of his, muttering something under his breath. The demon's voice boomed from her mouth, low and guttural, mocking us both. You think you can banish me? You can't. This love is mine to feast on. The words hit me like a ton of bricks. In that moment, I realized the only way to stop this was to sever the bond it was clinging to. My love for her was the anchor, the thing that kept it tied to this world. I didn't want to accept it, but deep down, I knew there was no other way. I stepped closer to her, my voice breaking. I don't love you, I said, each word like a knife in my chest. I've never loved you. I've resented you. Every laugh, every kiss, it's all been a lie. Her head snapped toward me, her eyes wide and bloodshot, tears mixing with the black goo. The demon screamed, a sound so shrill it rattled the windows. Her body convulsed as the sludge retreated into her skin. And then, finally, she collapsed on the table, motionless. The silence was crushing. I stepped forward, my heart breaking as I saw the anguish on her face. Even unconscious, she looked shattered. I wanted to hold her, to tell her I didn't mean a word of it, but I couldn't. Not yet. The priest stood beside me, grim-faced. It's gone, he said. For now. For now. I whispered. What does that mean? He didn't answer. He just turned and walked away, his shadow stretching long under the hallway lights. I stayed behind, watching the surgeons rush in to try to save her. Hours later, when we were finally alone, I sat by her hospital bed, holding her uninjured hand. She woke up, groggy and disoriented. Her eyes no longer yellow, no longer possessed. They were just tired, broken, full of pain. Did I hurt you? She whispered. No, primelit. You're okay now. We're okay. But as I stared into her eyes, I knew we weren't. The demon might be gone, but it left something behind. Scars deeper than anything possession could explain. And somewhere in the shadows, I swear I could feel it watching, waiting for the day it would come back.